Welcome everyone to this week's edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours. Thank you for taking time out of your Wednesday evening to spend it here in the spirit of community, mentorship, and learning. I'm your host, Dave Albright. I'm a lead solution engineer at Salesforce and Military Trailblazer. Each week, we invite a co-host or co-hosts to take part in the conversation so that we can leverage their experience, expertise, and unique perspectives. The focus for tonight's session is best practices for learning Salesforce and crushing exams. So probably a hot topic. We got a lot of thoughts on this, and it's near and dear to our hearts. So if you're looking for tips and guidance on how to upskill on the Salesforce platform and get exam ready, this is a session for you. I'd like to welcome and briefly introduce our co-host panel for tonight's session, Julie Workman, Jim Sharp, Lauren Zolp, and Marc Baizman. Julie is a senior technical program manager on the Trailhead Academy Salesforce credentialing team, supporting the super badge and hands-on credential program. She's also a Golden Hoodie recipient, a 15X certified Salesforce applicant architect, and a Navy veteran spouse. Jim is an education solution architect at Salesforce. He has over 20 years of experience in information tech, serving in a variety of roles, including support engineer, training delivery specialist, and solution consultant. He learned Salesforce from the ground up through Trailhead mentorship and classroom learning, and now helps customers develop role-based learning recommendations to unlock the full value of the Salesforce platform. Lauren Zolp is a solution consulting manager at Salesforce. She's also a Golden Hoodie recipient, 14X certified system and application architect, and an Air Force veteran. And lastly, Marc is a principal instructor for Trailhead Academy at Salesforce. He's been in the Salesforce ecosystem since 2006, leading the Boston and New York City nonprofit user groups as a Salesforce MVP before starting at Salesforce. Marc has had multiple roles, including customer success for nonprofits, admin evangelist, and now he's a principal instructor at Trailhead Academy, teaching people how to use our products. So it's great to have you guys, and this is probably going to be a pretty heavy-hitting meeting tonight with a lot of questions coming at you. So I just want to say a quick welcome, and then I'll go into session purpose, and we'll open it up. So welcome all of you, and thank you for taking the time, especially working after a long day and now taking the time for this. For those joining for the first time, we always like to briefly explain the purpose of these office hours before we open the floor for questions and discussion. These sessions are an informal get-together for gathering with military trailblazers and allies to explore non-technical Salesforce career and branding-related topics to help you achieve your professional development and career-related goals. The next hour is intended to be an opportunity for collaborative mentorship. Everyone on the call is encouraged to step up and ask any questions and even help answer questions from your perspective. It helps provide a lot of additional diversity of experience to the answers given. Please keep an eye on the chat window during tonight's sessions. Dave and I will be, and some others on the call, share a lot of great information in there, including learning, networking, employment opportunities. And if you'd like to ask a question anytime during today's session, please feel free to do so. If you don't feel comfortable speaking up, you can also post your questions in chat. We'll do our best to monitor the chat window. Dave and I will both be working it and also looking for raised hands. And finally, tonight's session is being recorded. So if you'd like to share an attribution-free comment, please let us know before you speak, and then we'll make sure that it's edited out of the final recording. So that takes care of all the admin. I'll go ahead and turn it over to our co-host. If anyone has any opening questions, I think you guys made a slide deck, and we'll go ahead and post that, and we'll start it off.
I just want to say how happy I am to be here and to see everyone that's here today. I'm so glad to evangelize about all of our credentials.
Same, for sure. So I'll take us through the slides here. Thank you, David, for hosting us today on the panel. I will put our forward-looking statement up. You haven't attended a Salesforce presentation. If you haven't seen this forward-looking statement before, just please make any purchasing decisions based on products or services that are currently available. We might make some forward-looking statements in this session today. And this is everyone who is here. I know we were going to skip this, but maybe each person could do a super quick 30 seconds over and above the very quick intro that Dave Albright gave us.
Okay, well, I will start and say that I, in addition to all of that good stuff, very passionate about Salesforce and our Trailblazer community. I'm happy for anyone to connect on LinkedIn or wherever else. I stumbled into Salesforce as an accidental admin in the nonprofit world, and I loved learning that way, but I'm really glad we can share some other ways to learn and show what you know today.
Yeah, and hey, I'm Jim Sharp, and like Julie said, in addition to all of that other stuff, I really wanted to emphasize that when I got hired at Salesforce about 8 years ago, it was because of the experience that I had in terms of customer service, but I had zero Salesforce experience. You can do this because I did it ground up using Trailhead. Every resource was at my disposal with Trailhead, and this is something that you can do. You just have to focus and be dedicated.
All right, next is me. So hello all, Lauren Zolp. In addition to everything you heard about me, I think what you should know that really pertains to this topic is I spent years unemployed after getting out of the Air Force and really zero background in computer science, zero background in engineering, really learned from the ground up, much like some of the people on the call here accidentally fell into this ecosystem and have now come to be a solution consulting manager at Salesforce, working in the public sector. It is my passion, and I'm so excited to be talking with all of you tonight. Marc.
Thanks so much, Lauren. And thanks, everybody. I sort of put everyone on the spot here, so I appreciate you all rolling with it. Hey, everyone. My journey kind of started much like Julie's, I think, in the nonprofit world, where I was kind of handed Salesforce and said, figure it out. And I feel like I've somehow found my way into working here at Salesforce as an instructor. So in a strange way, my journey has come full circle here, that I get to help other folks who are maybe in the same situation as I was way back in 2006. And I've had a number of family members who've served, and I'm based here in San Diego, where there's lots of Navy folks, and I was lucky enough to see the Top Gun premiere from a distance, which is to say on the aircraft carrier that I could point to, but not actually see. Anyway, I will take us into what we're going to talk about, and then maybe I'll turn it back over to Dave here for our panel topics. But basically, these are the three areas that we're going to focus on talking about today to give our conversation a little bit structure, so it's not a total free-for-all. I love seeing the chat messages here, so absolutely keep those going. We'll do our best to keep up with those. They're super, super active, so thanks all. With that, I'll maybe turn it back to you, Dave Albright.
Yeah, so thank you all for the great openers. I mean, a great panel of people to talk to here tonight, and I think there's a lot of people who have a lot of questions about, everything involving certs, but I think I'll open it with what I always consider my number one question, especially when I talk to people who are coming into Salesforce, right? There's two hard things in Salesforce. There is getting a job, right? Breaking into the ecosystem. And then there's getting through that first cert. And really, the first cert is just one of many, right? But the first one's what I would consider the hardest, because you just don't have the experience, right? You don't have the hands-on unless you've been an accidental admin and you've been working with it and then decide to take a cert. If you're just kind of coming into it, coming out of the military or coming off the street and just trying to get that first cert done, it's pretty brutal. It's an emotional experience for a lot of people. So I think I will say, I'll just throw that out there, right? We'll start off with, let's start with the easy go-to, right? What's more important? Certs, experience, credentials, or not necessarily credentials, but like super badges. And so I'll toss that one out there as a softball and see where it goes.
Well, you said my favorite word, so I'll
I know,
just hop in there.
I threw it for you.
Yeah. So I'm a program manager supporting super badges and our hands-on credentials. And part of what you had just said, that big pain point of that first certification, we can actually really reduce that pain point, because our super badges, and especially with our newer, shorter super badge units, you can really start showing what you know and getting a lot of hands-on experience and building a portfolio. So really kind of doing all three, getting credentials, showing what you know, building a portfolio that you can share with potential employers. And so for those who haven't seen them yet, our super badges are hosted on Trailhead. They look just like our learning content, but they are not teaching, they are testing, they are assessments. And they're a really great way to hop in, get your toe in the water. And they also align with a lot of our certification exams, which are our other type of credential in our Salesforce credentialing ecosystem. So I'm a huge advocate for super badges. As someone with a whole lot of certifications, they have their place, and it's very important to me that those certifications are really important and hold a lot of weight, and they should. And super badges are really gaining visibility in how they are a really important assessment tool, because you're actually going into a Salesforce org, configuring a solution according to the requirements, and then we're checking your solution to make sure you actually did what you were supposed to do or asked to do by the requirements. So I'm going to say that super badges are a great way to bridge that gap. Also, we have a new associate certification, and that associate is a great way to start your certification journey as well.
And to add on that a little, I was just going to, some of the credentials or the certifications that we have now are actually a combination of a multiple choice test and super badges. Platform Developer 2, JavaScript certification, those are two that come to mind. And we did do the forward-looking statement, so I think it's a direction that's going for some of more of the certs going forward. Julie, you may be able to speak to that more than I can, but I know that's a direction that we're going, and some of the certs actually are a combination of the two.
From my perspective, too, I feel like I did everything backwards. So I was studying, got the job, got certified, then did super badges. And I feel like I probably should have done that the opposite way, because what you learn from super badges is also a methodology for working through a problem. And you're going to see that a lot when you get to your first job. And so I think I'd start there with a super badge, try a super badge, just one, and then head very quickly into certifications, because that is like your check that, yes, I understand this tool and I can prove that I do so. So that's my answer.
Building a little bit on what Lauren said, super badges can be a challenge, right? That's literally the point of super badges. So if you want to start kind of a little bit of a lighter lift, try the projects in Salesforce on Trailhead, because they really give you the step-by-step concept. So depending on what area it is that you're trying to focus on, whether it's automation and you want to build something in Flow, or creating a custom field or a custom object, some of the projects that are on Trailhead will really give you that step-by-step instructions on how to do something. Then you can check to make sure that you got it right. You understood sort of the how to do it. And then the super badges are really great for kind of leveling up, right? Now you're given business scenarios, business requirements, and then you need to solve for those. And you don't get the step-by-steps on the super badges, right? You get the idea, but you have to figure out the step-by-step yourself. So can't say enough about starting with projects and then leveling up into super badges, but getting hands-on in an org is always the way.
Yeah, I think that builds the muscle memory, right? And gives you the application level of knowledge, because this is the great argument of the certs versus experience, right? Versus super badges is what is really more important. If you're good at taking tests, you can knock out certs pretty quickly, but that doesn't really mean you have the experience. And the other thing is a cert is somewhat unrealistic. You have to know that answer perfectly, right? And you have to know those 3 answers of the 5 answers and not get any one wrong, where in reality, if you're working in an org, a lot of times you kind of click in and you'll click your way into it, right? Or Google your way into it. So, I think the super badge is a nice bridge to that, where it shows the application. We do have one question, actually we have 2 questions. Any chances on some of the NPSP super badges? It's for Julie.
That's near and dear to my heart, so I hope so.
Okay.
Tweet about it. Tweet about it loudly. Get all your friends to tweet about it.
There's a health cloud specialist super badge, so it's in a similar-ish industry. So that might be your next step there.
And so a follow-on question, any thoughts on what appears to be a new approach to super badges like security specialists, whereas multiple smaller prerequisites for each of them awards its own super badge?
Absolutely. I can tell you all about it.
Julie's so excited.
I know. I love it. We're rolling out 2 huge projects this year. One is a 6 super badge series for security and one for process automation, mostly Flow, which we're really excited about. We unveiled those at Dreamforce. The super badge units you probably can complete them in about an hour. If you are super proficient, some people have them done in 15 minutes. If you're really new to it, takes a few hours. And again, this is an assessment. So those super badge units are basically building blocks, and they actually build up to a capstone. And completing that capstone is what's equivalent to those sort of big super badges that we had published up until this year. So the super badge units are smaller bits that you can stack together. And, you know, forward-looking statements, I hope we get to make a ton of them so we can start to, you know, build them together and make some really cool combinations. So you can, you know, your skill sets don't necessarily align to one particular role. So our credentials don't either. They allow you that flexibility.
And so I'll ask one question. It may be the unpopular one. Julie, you may want to go after me later. Super badges can be a little finicky, right? Because you're emulating an answer and the computer is trying to grade this thing that you're doing in an org. And there's always, for lack of a better phrase, 1,000 ways to skin a cat when you're in an org and a solution. So is that getting better, or is there a way to tackle that helps kind of ease that, ease the answer to help get it through?
Yes, and especially with our super badge units, they are hyper focused on one particular type of skill. So for example, you'll be seeing some new content that's launching very, very soon, like maybe Monday, on Flow. And so what we're able to do is just really focus on the particular topic. So if we're talking about flow elements, we're not also asking about, you know, 10 other things with troubleshooting and so forth. If something requires a formula, we're going to give you the formula because we're not testing on formulas. We're looking at your ability to use flow elements. Also, some of the super badges that were built in 2016, we've either rewritten them. We review every super badge, every release, just like our certification exams. We are constantly evolving all of the published content, and we've retired some content. So some of the stuff that was a little bit tricky isn't even published any longer. So go take a look at it. What's out there?
And then in a follow-on for super badges, is there a few particular super badges or how many that recruiters or hiring managers are looking for with a new admin? And I'll take a stab at that before I pass it over to you guys. I think that really it really depends on what kind of job you're going into. If you're just going into a straight admin, I think some of the basic super badge groups that you get there as you go through the admin cert are probably the good ones. But if you're kind of going towards the dev side, you'd probably want the Apex specialist and something like that. So I'll pass it over to the panelists now and see what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, anyone else can contribute too.
Oh, I would just say, look at the supersets in the super badges. You know, so like there's an admin superset. I think it's the security specialist. I'm doing this off the top of my head. Help me out.
Yep. Business administration, reports and dashboards, and security. Yep, you got it.
Yeah, but so if you do those three super badges, you know, that's the admin superset. There's a developer superset. There's an app builder superset. That's what, you know, that's the low code, no code. We used to call it declarative programming. So I would look at maybe doing one of these supersets. But to me, the key is like if you're going to say, oh, my experience on Salesforce is doing these super badges, be prepared to speak at least, you know, kind of at a level a little deeper, you know, about what you learned and what business process you went through and what was the thought process that went into solving the super badge. I think that the super badge, I've done like 10 of them. And so they are super challenging, and they definitely will put you to the test of your skills. So, but yeah, so to me, completing one of those, I mean, that's impressive. So if you did a whole superset, I think that's really impressive.
Yeah, and I just want to piggyback on Jim. So I think if I were to do it again, like I said, I'd probably start with the super badges. But at this stage in our Salesforce ecosystem, certs still matter, and a super badge is amazing, and that's going to give you the most experience hands-on solving something. You're going to learn much more if you're actually in a real life scenario and you're trying to build your way out of it. You're going to learn much more than if you're just blanket studying. I know that from experience. Now, I would not lose sight of certifications, though. They are still a very valuable part. And so how I would craft my if I were to do it again, I would start with super badges with the end goal of becoming certified to prove that knowledge. Don't lose sight of those certifications, because that really helps career switchers or second careerists.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. If I was to do it all over again, right, coming into the ecosystem, and it wasn't that long ago, I think the answer would be you'd have some super badges, some sets of them, have a cert, and kind of like Dave Nava, build your own portfolio, right? Get a dev org and show that you can build some stuff in there, right? Like, hey, I created this, and you know, I track all the dishes in my house, whatever it is, but show that you can relate objects, that you can make custom objects, fields, things like that. And that's the kind of thing I think that kind of stands out in a way and says, oh, you know, you actually can apply the knowledge with it. You can take the test, you can pass the test, and you can, you know, actually apply this knowledge in an org. I think I went the route of realizing certs were probably more valuable than maybe they should be. And I mean that in a manner that, and Lauren just kind of touched on it, that certs carry a lot of weight. And so my process was, and I learned this one from Dave Nava, was get up at 4 in the morning and study for 2 hours every day and just crush certs. And so I'm going to ask 2 quick questions, and then I want to actually transition to some of the how to study for certs. And I'm probably going to pass that to Lauren, because I know Lauren can be a rock star at smashing certs. So how long should one wait or not wait after completing a super badge to ensure the skills used match credential testing? I'll pass that out to the panelists. I don't know if there's really a set time on that one.
I'll give you the consultant answer. It depends. So you're welcome. As my pre-Salesforce life, ultimately it's about how soon are you going to apply the knowledge. I think particularly around our certifications, right? It's a lot of great theory, and if you're doing a ton of studying on things like sharing rules and security and permissions, that's awesome, and you may be able to demonstrate that knowledge for the exam. But if you're then not going to use it, speaking for myself, right? If I'm not going to use it for 6 months, guess what? I'm going to have to relearn that material when I actually have to use that in my Salesforce org or in, you know, an org that I'm working in. So I would just say, generally speaking, right, the closer it is between the knowledge and applying that knowledge is always a good thing. So just that's been my personal experience, but love to hear from our other folks.
Right, and there's also a note about, you know, kind of switching the conversation to exam prep, but I would say that all of these notes on getting hands-on, that is the best exam prep. So for each exam, and thank you for sharing that screen, and you can see all the certification exams, each one of those has an exam guide, and I'm not sure those exam guides are really, people may not know enough about them or leverage them enough, but those exam guides are going to tell you specifically what's on the exam, how much each section is worth. You know, is it 20%? If there's something that's 4%, that's not true. If there's, you know, 4% of the exam, you don't need to spend a whole lot of time preparing for it. If it's something that's 25% of the exam, that's where I'm going to spend my time. So I would start by looking at that document, you know, going through what we're seeing right now on the screen exactly, and I would get hands-on however I can. Super badge, that's the easiest way to know that what you're doing is right, because before Trailhead, we had to just go get a dev org and turn everything on, and you had no idea if you were doing things right. You just go click some buttons and something would happen. Maybe it worked, maybe it didn't. So with the super badge, you do have that confirmation that you've done something well. But I would just get hands-on. I saw somebody saying they built a dev org tracking beer. Great. I just posted a couple links that were, you know, Dave's guest book and a really cool example about using flow in a community. You're just getting hands-on according to what's tested and how much in the exam.
Okay, let's transition to certs. They're obviously a hot topic, right? How to pass these beasts. How do you map out your study plans for certifications? Do you have a set goal date and schedule it, or schedule when you feel ready? And I will answer that and then pass to the panelists. I'll give you my 2 cents, and that's really all it's worth is 2 cents, because everyone really has to pick their path themselves. But I usually set a date and I put the test out there. And you can always move that test. I think you got 48 hours out, you can move the test. But I get pretty regimented about how I do it. And so that drives me. If I have that on the calendar, I know that date is coming, like the Titanic and the iceberg. I know I have to really get on it. And so every morning, and I have a regime of, okay, I'll take like a 20 question quiz if it's focused on Porsche or whatever every day, and then start taking the test to kind of start feeling out how I'm doing. So that's just one person's opinion on it. But now to the panelists, what are your thoughts?
Well, I would definitely set a date, because I would be the worst of just keep putting off the date of when to do it. So I would want to just set a date and then say, okay, by this date I have to do it. So then 2 weeks before, 3 weeks before, I'm studying 2 hours a day and getting ready. And that's pretty much the way I would do it.
How I would do it is, yes, I would probably commit to a date, and I would commit to a study strategy. And Mark, Julie, I know you two have some great thoughts on study strategy, so let's go there next. I would set a set amount of time per day that I was going to be studying or learning or building things hands-on. Again, I don't want to lose sight that building things hands-on is the best way to learn, whether that's tracking beer, tracking anything, building silly things. Get in Salesforce and build. You would say, well, why not just study the questions that are going to be on the admin exam? Well, because you want to be preparing yourself for actually doing the job, not passing a test, right? And so you need to be learning every single day. And even if you fail when that exam date comes, that arbitrary date, at least you know that you've learned. And that's not a failure, because you're learning every single day. So yes, commit to a time, like Dave Nava and Dave Albright say. Waking up early, for me, I have 2 young children. That really helps me out, and I find that's the most distraction-free period of my day. Committing to that, and then a date to take my exam, and really just a study strategy, that's how I would do it. Now, to Mark and Julie, study strategies, please.
Well, I would also add that it's okay to, Lauren, I really like what you said, because having that real skill gives you that confidence and helps you to avoid that imposter syndrome entirely. You can just cut it out, because you can say, I crushed this, I did it. However, life is not always that way. And I will admit that for my most recent sharing and visibility designer exam, I meant to postpone because I wasn't ready. I forgot. I missed the 48-hour window, took it. And I very firmly believe that failing an exam or anything else is really just part of your entire story, your entire process. I don't know anyone who has not failed an exam. So I would also say, don't be afraid of just trying it. Don't cold turkey it. Don't just go take it to, try and learn the questions or anything like that. But, I forgot to cancel it. I knew I had prepared some, not as much as I wanted, took it, passed. Like, we don't have to have a whole lot of anxiety around that. I recognize that anxiety is a real thing, but you can manage that by saying that. So like, I never tell anybody when I'm studying or preparing or taking an exam. I just come home and I'm like, hey, guess what? So, you can take the pressure off. Failure is an option, is what I want to really reinforce too.
Yeah, there's a couple questions on here that I'm going to get to in just a second, but yeah, I actually wrote, because Lauren kind of touched on it, I wrote fail in big letters over here on my note page, because failing is part of the process, right?
Dave, if I could weigh in on study strategy real quick.
Go ahead.
For me, it's all about accountability. And personally, even if I have the schedule and I have the topics and I have the exam date, if I don't have a squad with me, that's tough. So I like to gather together folks and set that same deadline and set that same goal so that we're all on that path together. And, obviously, the more folks that you are trying to align schedules with, the more challenging it can be. But even if I have one other study buddy, that helps me a ton. So I would just say, if it's, sort of loosey-goosey and I'm the only one who's committed, sometimes that's challenging for me. So if I have even one other accountability buddy, that can help me a ton. So highly recommend, partnering up with at least one other person, so you can sort of both celebrate whether you pass that exam or not. Guess what? I didn't pass my admin exam the first time way back when. So Failing is a learning experience.
Yeah, I will never mess up the relationships of master detail or lookup after. I mean, I failed App Builder twice, and that one hurt. That one hurt real bad, and I did it on my wife's birthday at like 8 in the morning, and because I thought I had it made. I was like, "Oh, happy birthday to you!" But you know, I won't. I don't have issues with those relationships anymore. You know, you learn as much from the failures. I think I've learned more from the failures than I have from, just the straight passing. Sometimes that just, you know, if you're not using it, like some of Sales Cloud Consultant, if it's forecasting, quotes, stuff like that, sometimes that stuff's just gone until you need it again. I think the important thing of testing sometimes is that it's out there. I was just talking to someone about this the other day. From learning this stuff, you've at least known what's capable within the ecosystem or in that cloud so that you can go Google it then and go, okay, I remember this is somehow in here. I just got to figure out what it is. But failing stuff definitely teaches you, and you don't really mess it up after that. So I'm going to come back to questions.
Hey, really quick, Dave. Someone had asked about a study group. There's tons of study groups in the Trailblazer community. I posted one of them, Study Salesforce with Steven. He attends sessions sometimes as a great study group, so there's that resource. But if you go in the Trailblazer community, you can find a ton of other resources, as well as the military Trailblazer community. There are study groups there as well.
And I'm sharing a link for cert days, certification days. Those are so great. They are free. They are jam-packed. They go for about 5 hours and cover so much ground. And I can't say enough good things about those cert days.
Yeah, I think the groups are really good, being able to work with people, especially if you've got experienced people or accidental admins out there who have got the experience and worked with it a little bit, then it definitely helps. All right, next question. How do you get yourself out of the habit of following instructions on Trailhead versus actually learning the topic without completing instructions? Before I pass that to the panel, a wise person told me when I was coming in, the training is in the trail. And I was like, what? What do you mean? Because you're clicking through, right? You're trying to get X number of badges. You're trying to make Ranger. You're trying to get your free cert voucher if you're a military Trailhead. And, a lot of times you're just whipping through it and you don't realize that the training is actually in there and kind of working through it and thinking through what you're actually doing. So I'll pass that to you, panelists. What are your thoughts?
Get hands-on.
Yeah.
Like, just use your DevOrgs to build stuff. Press all the buttons, try projects and super badges. Because I know what you mean. A lot of times you can go through something and feel like, oh, okay, well, I did it, but I'm not really sure it's sunk in. Keep doing it. Repetition, try it from different angles. Try doing what you just did step by step, but model it, change something, make it apply to you and say, well, how would I do it solving this type of problem? And that's why I like when someone uses a DevOrg to track something in their life, softball games, whatever, a house, home renovation, you're going to come across problems that you're going to solve because you have a vested interest in it, and it's not going to be cookie cutter, and you're actually going to have to grapple with something. How can I automate this, or how could I make this easier to use, or how can I make this go the other way, whatever it is, because you're going to bump into those situations and you're going to figure out a way to solve them, and that's just a great way to learn.
Whenever I'm going through a Trailhead project or super badge or I always ask myself why. Like, what is this step? Because you definitely can get robotic and look at the steps and just say, oh, okay, I need to go into setup, and then I need to type this in quick find. But I always like, why am I doing this? Where am I really going? What am I doing? What are permission sets? What are they? So that's the way I go through those projects, and I try to get myself not to be robotic. And the training is definitely in the trail. I always refer to Trailhead. It's kind of the ultimate, you get out of it what you put into it, because the ones that aren't hands-on, there's no hands-on challenges. You can just go to the bottom and answer the questions, but what are you learning? So if you don't have the time to focus and put the time in it, don't do that module right then. I mean, some of them really take some learning, some focus, and some really reading, and what are they actually saying, and why are we doing this, and what does it mean, and how is it relevant? That's what I always ask myself when I'm going through the projects in Trailhead. So you have to figure out what what is the purpose of this? And that's kind of, a lot of the Trailhead modules are written in a way where they're laying out a use case in a way. And, so I always try to figure out, okay, what are they asking me and what are we trying to do?
Let's get into any test taking tips. Like, I know I definitely, and Dave Nava, if you could, I think I put Dave Liu's 8 test taking tips down there somewhere in our list. That was one that I kind of faithfully follow. I will take them usually in the afternoon when the house is empty. I will manage how much fluid I have drank, both to be hydrated enough so that I'm thinking, but not too hydrated, so that about an hour into the test, you're seeing yellow and trying, because I did, the first time I did App Builder, my dog was licking his paw, which he was having problems with, and I could hear him in the other room. And I'm not gonna lie, I had to go to the bathroom. And I was like, I got it. I clicked, I did the one big foul of pressing submit before my 105 minutes was up, and was like, I got it. And it said fail. And it was like, just a punch to the face, as we all know. So do you have any test taking tips or mantras that you follow?
I'll jump in. I would say, generally speaking, and this is, overall test taking tips and particularly geared towards our certification process, don't get hung up on any single question. If you're not sure, you have to pick something. Just make sure that you mark that for review. If the answers are similar, if there are 2 similar answers, chances are it's probably one of those. So pick one of those ones that's super similar, mark it for review, and come back for it. That at least gives you like a 50% chance right away and keeps you from running out of time. The other tip that I would say is sometimes it's really easy to get caught up or confused by the scenario that they're giving. Try to see past the scenario and get to the actual topic that they're really asking about. I don't care about Cloud Co. I just need to see if they're asking about sharing rules. That's the thing that they're kind of getting at in that question, for example. But sometimes when you're reading it, you're like, okay, what's this company and what do they do? None of that actually matters. The real thing is they're trying to get to some feature or function of the product. If you can see past that and get to the thing that they're really trying to ask.
I've definitely read questions, and I think on PD1, I think I read each question probably 3 times, and just scratching my head, like, what are they saying there? I'm like, whatever, let's just try and get through it. Anyone else?
Ones that have the multiple, and like it says pick 2 or pick 3. I found that if you try, I discovered this when I was taking one of the tests that I was taking, and I was like, hey, wait a second, these 2 answers go together and these 2 answers go together. So I always come back to profiles and sharing rules. So, when you get into security, those 2, one is about profiles, one's about permission sets, and then the other one's about OWD, and the other one's about a sharing. So those 2 answers go together. And I would figure out, okay, from those answers matching, then I would go back and reread the question, and I would say, okay, are they asking me about a profile, or are they asking me about a sharing rule? And you know what I mean? So to me, the answers can give a little, window into the question.
Yeah, go ahead, Julie.
I was going to say some specific tips for if you're doing online proctored. I'm about an hour and a half away from our closest testing facility, so I've done quite a few online. And some things to note are that you don't have the paper and pencil when you're taking online proctored. So keep that in mind. For me, it's a little bit harder to do those designer scenario questions with no paper. I do like the paper, but I will say a couple things about taking online proctored is just anticipate that some stuff could go kind of sideways. You're not in that perfect testing environment, no matter how hard you try. So, one time I was taking an exam and my husband started printing something right behind my head, and I was like, is this 600 page? What manual are we printing here? Or there's the dogs barking, the delivery person is coming. One time I started celebrating too soon. My husband walked in and they said they were going to invalidate the test. I freaked out because that was the, developer. So just things can get it's okay. And even if your, internet fails, you can resume the exam. You can't leave and come back. but they'll help you if there is some sort of hiccup. You can, you can restart it. You can start it the next day. Things happen with internet and things happen at home. So just know that also the proctors will sometimes ask you to pause and do something like speak out loud to make sure your sound is on so there's not someone, whatever. So those proctors might stop you, and that can be really rattling if you are really hyper focused on a particular question and all of a sudden the screen changes.
Yeah.
So just know that, like, build in a little bit of anticipate some of that may happen, and just give yourself grace with that online proctoring. But it certainly is convenient, and it can be really a great resource.
When they stop you, right, and you're thinking, right, and so you look off the side of the screen, and when they stop you, first of all, you think the whole program has crashed, right, because it just kind of stops, nothing happens for a minute, and all of a sudden the script comes up and they start writing to you. They don't talk to you, they just write to you, and it really throws you off. It takes you a good hot minute to get back into the test mode where you're like, okay, where was I? What am I doing? Did I screw up? Am I failing? I know me personally, maybe I have issues, but by the 10th question of every test so far, and I've got, I think, 9 certs, and I've taken, I think, 12 of them. So I failed 3. By the 10th question, in my mind, I have failed. I'm like, man, I have definitely not studied enough. So on the 10th question so far, like every test now, I take them longer, as I take more of them. On the 10th question, I'll just tell myself, you haven't failed, you're good. Just take a breath, take each question by itself. Don't think about the whole test, because it definitely gets in your head for sure. Question, I recently heard accommodations are available for those with various situations outside of normal test taking, like extended time. Can you elaborate? Anyone know anything about that? I haven't heard that.
Yes, you can log a case. Accessibility is extremely important, and the team that manages those kinds of operations will work with you and figure out what's appropriate and make sure that happens. There's a great team behind that.
Excellent. I didn't know that. That's awesome. Mr. Nava.
Yeah, we had a question building on the best study routine for success. And you had mentioned, David, my routine of getting up 2 hours before work. They're asking what other routines have worked for people if you're working full time or not, or you don't, or you're not working full time. And so I would just add that I utilize what I call dead space in between things happening to study. So I'll have my Trailhead Go mobile app. I'll have Salesforce Help and Training up on my mobile phone. In between sets, when I'm working out, when I'm waiting for my food to cook, dentist office, I will go to my phone and I will, study that one question, study that one topic. And I'm doing that constantly. If you really want it, you'll get there and you'll utilize that time. If you're sitting on the couch at night, like watching TV for 2 hours, that could be study time. I mean, there's a point that, yes, you do want to relax, you want to have work-life balance. But if you really want it, you will find the time to get there. And you got to use those little moments in the day where you're otherwise doing nothing, you're just waiting.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on you, Dave Nava. All right, so I'm going to say something. Some of you love Jocko Willink, some of you hate Jocko Willink, but something I think that he said that was very wise is discipline equals freedom, right? And so there is no secret to studying for an exam. It's hard. It's hard for all of us, even those of us who test taking is easier for, right? It's hard. And so you have to be disciplined in your approach and in your pursuit. And sometimes that looks like getting up at 4 a.m. Sometimes it looks like staying up a little bit later. Sometimes it looks like saying no to social engagements for a little while until you get through this stage of your life. But I promise you, if you're disciplined and you put this work in, you will get there, and the reward is great.
Yeah, I used to, back when I was just starting the ecosystem, huge amounts of imposter syndrome, and everyone here can talk about that at any given point in the day, right? We all go through it. When you're at like 1 or 2 certs, you're like, I don't know, I'm never going to make it. No one's ever going to hire me. And I got my mind fixed on how do I get more certs to make myself more valuable, right? And we'll talk very quickly here in a second about what certs are worth, right? Because they definitely have different point values for the partners and for consultants. Let's see, what are your go-to Trailhead resources when studying for exams, and how do you leverage them? What is your study process when using Trailhead materials?
Yes. Okay. So what you don't know about me is I was first trained as a linguist before I entered this Salesforce ecosystem. So know a thing or two about studying. And what I like to do is you need to approach it from an understanding perspective. Study for understanding. Don't study to know an answer. Studying for understanding is going to get you further than just knowing an answer off the top of your head. What that looks like for me. So I go through, so I love Trailhead. That's obvious, right? I love Trailhead. I go through my badges and I am a note taker. And after I finish a badge and I've taken notes, I go put those into either some kind of flashcard software, anything like that, where I can just keep reminding myself of that. And that helps me out a lot. I'm going to pass it to my other panelists. They're a bit of experts on this as well.
I do the same thing. I have a quip or something like that, and by the end of it, it's 30 pages. Who knows? But I'll print it out, and I'll just the same idea of that dead space, having that printed out, and I put on there only the things that I either am new to or unsure about or frequently flip, like master detail, whatever those things are. That's what makes it in the document. It's not like the everything. So it's just for me, the things that are my gaps, I print it out and then I have that available to me, and it's one more way of seeing it for me, and I look at it frequently. So I do something really similar.
Plus, I find things that there's stuff that I want to keep as like pocket lint in the back of my mind. And I use notes, but same thing, right? Quip, where you're just kind of like, ooh, one day I'll need to revisit that again. Leo, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to make up a comment. One of the things that I would recommend is don't go solo. Everybody wants to be the hero and go solo. I don't understand that. I had an opportunity to sit with one of our teams a few years ago that created exam questions, and there's a lot of thought that goes into creating the scenarios. It's not to trick you. It is really to demonstrate that you do know the material, and the answers are, as you heard from everybody else, they're in the platform. The majority of the first admin exam, if you've gone through that exam and you studied through the trails, you'll know that a lot of the answers are literally the screens when you're configuring as an admin. So number one, partner up with somebody. Number two, just echoing what everybody said here about making sure that you go through the trails to understand the material, not just to memorize and pass an exam. That's it.
Yeah, agreed. Lauren, go ahead.
Okay, so not a comment here, but what I want to cover, since we're kind of on this theme, before we wrap up, is what to do after you fail. What have our
Ooh, I was
panelists
just going to bring it
done
up.
after they have failed? Because that's hard. Okay, so I brought up the question. I'm going to pass it.
Well played.
I'll talk about it because I failed my first one. So I failed it twice before I passed it. You can come back and pass it, I promise. The key for me is that section level feedback that you do get emailed to, and you see it right away, although you're probably not seeing much other than red if you do get that fail message. You just step away and, celebrate in whatever way makes sense to you.
Here sometimes.
Yeah. The section level feedback is really, really valuable. I don't know anybody who hasn't failed at least one of these exams. And the section level feedback should be for you a bright arrow as to the areas that I can focus my energy on the next time. Also, just going through the experience of taking the test is itself a learning experience. There is a question bank that all of these exams are drawn from. And guess what? The next time you take it, you might have some of the exact same questions. Obviously, there's no guarantee on that, but the reality is if you know the answer the first time, you're probably at least going to know some percentage of the answers the second time you take it. And again, use those orgs. Use your dev orgs. Use your Trailhead playgrounds. And other people have failed. You're not the only one.
Yeah, there used to be a hashtag on LinkedIn, I think. Failed my first one. I can't remember. It was a consultant from IBM put it on there, and it was pretty funny because I was like, yeah, know that one. And I think the thing is, you have to know. Dave Nava told me this before we worked together, was no one knows how many times you failed it. They only know that you passed it, right? And so you just take the hit and have a moment, go in the shower and cry where no one can see the tears, and just get back up and get into it, right? And I think the fastest thing really is to try and come back around in that 24-hour period. Study, like Marc just said, study the parts that you're weak, but be careful that you're not neglecting the parts where you're strong, because they will routinely surprise you on that second test. And you're like, whoa, I was expecting to ace that because I'd already gotten good scores before, but now you've got a new bank of questions. And I can tell you from taking an app builder 3 times, the second time I did not see any of the questions from the first time. The third time, I think I started to see onesies and twosies maybe, and it's all going to be random. I don't know much to the test taking or the test strategy of how it delivers it, but I know one of the test taking strategies that I try to do is right after you push submit, don't even wait to see if you pass or fail, run to a pad of paper and write down the questions that you can remember or you had questions on. The problem is I'm usually, ironically, especially with my background and the things I have done, the scary things I have done, I can't remember one of those questions. It's hilarious. Like over the next couple of days, maybe one of these and twosies will start to come out. I'm like, oh yeah, I need to go look that up because I didn't remember that one. But yeah, anyone else have thoughts on that?
I agree, and it's part of your journey entirely. And then those questions, they're going to be in your head. Like, sometimes I didn't even know these were things. I thought they were made up, and turns out they're a thing. And I didn't even know it till I took the exam. That's not ideal. But then, that's going to surface in the other things that you're doing. I do want to make a point that I did not know this before joining our credentialing team, but we actually build all of our credentials, super badges, and certifications according to a very well-established industry best practices methodology. So I kind of just thought people were writing questions and making them up. I didn't really know what was going on. There's actually a whole team, and every credential we build, we have about at least 25 people who are in the field, who are consulting partners, customers, experts, MVPs, who are writing those actual questions. That's where they come from, is people in the field. So when it's a scenario-based question, it's because that scenario happens. And because of the amount of time it takes to create those questions, we do take security very seriously. And we look at every case you can always, if you see exam dumps or something like that, those get reported. We work on takedowns. It's not always the easiest thing to do. But that credentialing agreement, that program agreement, you've committed to not sharing those answers, not doing certain things. Maybe check it out. But that program agreement covers our certification exams and super badges. So I wanted to make that note about our methodology because I really just thought it was all kind of made up, but there's a lot of intentionality and a lot of work behind each one of those questions.
No, that's actually interesting. And I know Iris made a comment in there. And I remember taking Service Cloud, and there were some wonky questions in there. I was like, were these translated from Finnish? Because I'm not even sure where that comma came from. But and there's always those 5 trial questions that are in there. And sometimes as you maybe do more of these tests, you can kind of spot them because you're like, that doesn't make a lick of sense. That none of those answers even jive. And it kind of messes with your mind a little bit. And I don't know if it's not designed that way. I think it's just a test question to kind of throw out there. But you can kind of spot some of the crazier questions. But yeah, it is interesting. Sometimes there are some grammatical errors and things like that in there. And you're just like, I don't know what to do right now. But
there's also betas. We haven't talked about that, but betas are pretty cool because they're free, but they're very challenging because they're so long and you need feedback. But those are really fun. If you ever see the opportunity to participate in a beta, those are fun.
Oof, I don't know if I can handle that.
That's a lot.
I mean, there's no pressure, but it's like, oof. All right, it's 5:58, so I guess we'll wrap it up. I'd like to thank you all, Julie, Jim, Lauren, Marc, co-hosting tonight's session. Great information. We could probably do this for another hour, and people would probably have tons of questions for you. Awesome session having you here. Do you have any last closing thoughts, anything you want to put out there? This is it. This is the grand poobah right here.
what I love is you've got some highly certified, highly accomplished people on this panel who came from nowhere near a technology background. And every single person who's on this call, you absolutely can do this. Whatever your goal is, you can achieve it. The resources are there, and I have total faith in you.
Any other comments? Lauren, Mark?
Follow that. No.
Yeah, that was
No, what
that's a
Julie
tough one.
said.
You all, again, discipline equals freedom, set that goal. Just like you were in the military, just like you've been a military spouse or an ally, you've all been given these situations that seemed like, I can't do this. This is unbelievable. This is dumb. What? You can do it because you've done it. Just think back on your past and apply it to this. That's it.
Jim, Mark?
I can't really add much
Yeah.
on that, but you definitely can do it. It's all the resources are out there. Trailhead is an amazing repository of information.
Yeah, we
I
should
agree.
remind
Good
folks
luck
that we
to
didn't
everybody.
used to have Trailhead always, right? And we didn't
Mhm.
always get the breakdown of how we did in different sections. Some of us have been around before all that, and when we failed, there was a big thick book in our demo org or dev org that we had to go and restudied everything because we didn't know where the weakness of our exam were. Now we have great tools, so we need to take advantage of those.
Oof. Back in the old days.
Reiterate the, find a friend. You don't have to do
Yeah.
this alone. You don't have to be the hero. Find your squad and go together.
And I think
Yep.
that's the point of having these meets, right? It's not just for the 1 hour that we get to ask some really smart people some really hard questions. It's the fact that you can network and start to reach out to these people. We've all come on here as volunteers to kind of help, sponsor and mentor people. So reach out, use people. Hey, I'm having a hard time with a test. I'm having a hard time with this comment. There are issues in Trailhead occasionally, and sometimes reaching out to people that you start to find out, hey, how do I get the answer to this? I can't work through this. And then you spend some time with them. But with that, it's been an hour. I'd like to thank you all for attending. Hope to see you all next week and have a great Wednesday night. Feel free to reach out. And I think Dave will have the video up tomorrow. Thank you all.